Hey all, it's your girl Fee, bringing you authentic conversation to feed your soul and make you whole. Welcome to a little of this and a little of that. So what is this all about? It's about real talk, real stories, and real growth. It creates an open space for honest conversations. Wherever you're tuning in from, thank you. Hey all, it's your girl Fee, bringing you authentic conversation to feed your soul and make you whole. Welcome to another episode of a Likkle this and a Likkle that. I'm super excited about today because I have a legendary queen, Dr. Augustine herself. Everybody ain't told that Dr. Augustine is going to be on my podcast. Like, huh? How? What kind of links do you have? And I'm like, yes, I am super humble and honored. And so you will notice that I will have my laptop because you don't get this opportunity all the time. And I can't make any important point that I would like to impact you and me get missed. So welcome. Thank you for tuning in. And again, we're talking about Queen Dr. Augustine, Dr. Jean Augustine. So yes, of course, I'm super excited because I'm sitting next. Well, many times I've been in the honor of sitting and conversing and speaking with Dr. Augustine, who is the first Black woman member of Parliament in the House of Parliament. And there's so much to talk about today. And when I thought about someone of influence and impact to be talking to about the conversation around speaking up and being authentic, I could not think of another person. So, Dr. Jean Augustine, thank you so much for joining me.
Well, thank you, Fiona. Thank you to this post-Christmas day to come all the way from Etobicoke Lakeshore to Aurora. So it was nice and relaxing and just looking at the landscape. And as I came along, I was counting blessings for this beautiful country, this expanse of land, and the beautiful people who make up what we call Canada. So it was a reflective time for me coming to Aurora.
I'm glad it was. Yes, especially coming, well, even in the fall. I just love to see the trees and the color coming up on that highway. So thank you so much for being here. Dr. Augustine, when I started a Likkle this and a Likkle that podcast, I just wanted to be more comfortable speaking. When people said, you speak so naturally, but you also know your weakness and area to develop. I want to be more comfortable speaking. I want to learn to read from paper and speak. It's not one of my strengths. But I also realized that as I was talking to people, there's a hunger for authentic conversation from day-to-day people. It doesn't exist. Yes, we can hear from the celebrity, but they're not the person next door. They're not the stone throw away from the reality of what we're living. And so the conversation we're having is around authenticity, and speaking up is a big one for me. And so I'm going to get right into let you introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about who you are, because then my son know you are, but young children would know you are. Even older folks who still here in Canada, active, whether they're Black or white, and still don't know your role and the history and what you brought to us and make possible for Black History Month. So please tell us about yourself.
Well, in order to tell you about myself, I have to go back to Happy Hill, St. George's, Grenada. I was born in Grenada, 1937, a very good year. And so I'm in my 87th year of living. And when I came to Canada, I brought with me the traditions, the custom, the culture, what I learned growing up in a small village, as it were. There were certain things that I learned: respect for elders, to whom much is given, much is expected. And I had a grandmother who threw a lot of these sayings, right? There but for the grace of God, go I. In other words, help others. So I grew up in an environment where helping, caring, sharing, being part of community was essential. I went to St. Joseph's Convent, which was a boarding school in Grenada. And that's where I did my Oxford and Cambridge Overseas School certificate. And then took the opportunity with the Canada Caribbean Domestic Scheme to get myself into Canada to get some post secondary education and to help me, as it were, to reach my full potential in a society where there were opportunities. In Grenada, there were just about 4 opportunities open to me at the time coming out of high school. I could be a nurse, I could be a teacher, I could be a civil servant, I can work in the home. And those were the opportunities. We had no post secondary schools at the time. We now have some. There is the Grenada Medical School,
Okay.
which is an offshore American university. There is now programs by the University of the West Indies. There were programs, local programs um, that, like community college programs, put together by the local Grenadians. And but that wasn't there at the time when I was, as they would say, coming up.
Yes.
And so I had to look for opportunities. And so my opportunities, looking at my men cousins or my boy cousins who were all going to Europe and US and different parts, provided by their families, because the families thought it was important that the boys go and get an education and be a professional and come back. And the girls, they were less concerned about, girls and girls' education. But I had a grandmother who believed in girls' education, who believed that there is nothing a girl, and she said it, and I keep saying this all the time. She said it way before Obama said it. Yes, you can.
Yes.
Don't let the fact that you're a girl.
Yes.
And when she would take my marks in those days, they would give you marks and
Yes.
grade
Yes.
you
Yes.
first in
Yes.
the
Yes.
class, second
Yes.
in the
Yes. Yes.
class.
Yes.
And she would show everybody this, and ask some of the families, did your boy get marks like this? So I grew up an empowered young woman. I grew up with a sense of self. I grew up with a sense of community. So when I came here, 1960, I was looking for community. And so Canada was a different world at the time. We didn't have this multicultural nature, multicultural, multiracial, multi-ethnic, multi-religious society that we have today. And so there was a lot of work that had to happen to bring Canada to this fair and just and diverse society. And so I threw my 2 pennies with everybody who were activists in the society. And so we marched and we demonstrated and we petitioned and whatnot so we can have things like the Human Rights Commission, that we can have when the amendment to the human rights to the charter, the Canadian Constitution, that we can have a voice in Canadian society, that issues around education and the school boards and the trustees not talking to us,
Wow.
no police community relations. And so it was a lot of work that had to happen. So I became an activist and I became quite outspoken in terms of the issues
Yes.
that somehow were not making us what we said we were, a kind and just
Yes.
and diverse society. And I came with the intention of educating myself. So, of course, I went to teachers' college because that was what was done at the time if you wanted to be a teacher. So I did teachers' college, then university, and I got my BA and my master's in education, and continued on into PhD studies and whatnot. At the same time, working all of the
Wow.
time because it was
Wow.
important that I find a way to sustain
That's right.
myself. And I can tell you that no work, Fiona, is every work, every job, as long as it's legit
That's right.
and honest,
That's good.
it's good work.
Yes. I told that to my son all the time.
Right?
Yes.
So I did everything, from housework household work, from nanny work, from babysitting, cleaning houses, selling shoes at Eaton's, working. In the old days, they used to have the old elevator
Okay.
that they need an elevator person to open the door and close the door.
That existed?
Yes,
Wow.
yes, at the time. Those elevators, I think the other day I saw one in one of the old buildings downtown
Wow.
where somebody opens the
Yes.
door, you come in, they say, watch, and then they
Close.
close it, then they let you out. But that was a
Wow.
job,
Wow.
right? That was a job.
Wow.
Um, so I did whatever I could in the society. But I was always an advocate. I was always an activist. I was not the one to break down and to smash up. I believe that every time you present a negative or you present a comment, you must be prepared to have a solution.
That's right.
And so it was not just banging at the doors of politicians and policymakers, but coming with some solutions. This is how we can make life better. And I came through the education system from classroom teaching to vice principal to supervisory officer. Then I got noticed by people who were out there in policy making and in the political arena. Got appointed to several boards. I was on the board of Harborfront, Hospital for Sick Children, and on and on and on. Just as many opportunities that there were. At the same time, I was the only black face around the table. And to be the only black face around the table, knowing what you want for yourself, for your family, for your people, for your community, one had to be able to speak up and speak out. But one of the things that I learned very, very early is that you respect people's opinion, you respect their right to express their opinion, but you also have the right to tell them that's damn foolishness.
I like that.
But this is where did you get those facts? How do you know this?
Yes.
And so it's kind of challenging, but not challenging that you demolish people. Some
That's
people
right.
can challenge people and make
Yeah.
them feel so bad that
I
they
know.
want to run out of the
Yes.
room. But it's challenging. If we're going to be dealing with this, let's deal with it in a factual fashion. And so I always believe in the data collection, in the fact that we use research, reliable research, to do whatever we needed to have governments attend to. And so I was appointed to Metro Toronto Housing, where I headed public housing. And from there, I was asked to run. And in 1993, I ran as a Liberal member in Etobicoke Lakeshore. Won by 20,000 votes ahead of the next person.
Wow.
And got myself as the first African Canadian woman in the Parliament of Canada.
Amazing.
And it was amazing walking those halls and at the same time recognizing the fact that Black folks have been in Canada since 1603 or 1600 in early 1600, and that I would be the first Black woman to be elected. Prior to that, we had two Black men. We had Lincoln Alexander and we had Howard McCurdy. But by the time I was running, Lincoln was long gone, and Howard McCurdy lost, I think, that election in 93. And so I found myself there with Ovid Jackson, who was originally from Guyana and went from Guyana to London, to England. From England, he came back and he was the mayor of Owen Sound, I think, for 6, 7 terms before he ran as a Liberal. So he was a man, Black man. And so it was being in a place where there were opportunities to make a difference,
Mhm.
being in a place where you needed to make your voice heard
Yes.
authentically.
Yes. Yes.
And so that's what I did. I brought to the House of Commons um, my experiences, my community knowledge, my work and advocacy on certain issues. And I knew what those issues were and felt through my community engagement, through working with others. I did nothing on my own. I worked with so many people over the years. I knew what the issues were. And I know what we had to do to reach that inclusive society where we could be respected and where um, the promotional opportunities would be offered to us, where we can see ourselves reflected in the media,
Yes.
where we can see Black faces reading the news or
Yes.
hearing
Yes.
accents
Yes. Yes.
on
News.
radio,
Yeah.
where we could be seen as productive members of Canadian society,
Like we are. Yeah.
right? And so when there was this opportunity for me to bring forward the motion for Black History Month in Canada, it was not an easy time because at the time, in 1994, 1995, all we were talking about in politics was about trade issues,
Mm.
softwood lumber, yogurt and ice cream, boneless beef. Those were the discussions. And remember that also in 1993, for the very first time in the Parliament of Canada, we had two new political parties. We had the Bloc Québécois and we had um, the Reform Party, Preston Manning and the Reform Party. And so all the daily question period, all the pounding was about Canada's economic situation, the debt, the deficit, who we are as Canadians, the trade issues. And there I came on the side talking with Black folks,
Where does that
right?
fit in?
Talking about Black folks and trying to get the attention of parliamentarians around our presence. And if you go to the motion, I wanted a motion that was not debatable. And so going to the motion, you will see that I had 3 or 4 things in the motion that were not debatable. Mr. Speaker, you would find unanimous consent to the fact that, and again, we were here since 1603. We have been contributing to Canadian society. We are a diverse African Canadian community. None of that was debatable.
Yes.
And so I call on
Yes. Amazing.
for the acceptance of my motion for Black History Month in Canada. Um, it was not easy because in those days, um, we had no social media
Oh yeah.
and we
Oh
had none
boy.
of those things. The other day, I was telling this story to some high school students, and one young man at the back says, "Did you have to talk to all 300?" And I said, "Yes, I had to talk to all of them because I didn't know who was going to be sitting at the time when I'm going to put the motion." He said, "That was a lot of work. Why didn't you just send them an email?"
Sure.
So I said 1995. No, we worked from a list.
Yeah.
I had a check thing, and I would be stalking people, waiting by the elevator, by the washroom, by the bus, by their office door, asking them to support my motion. And when they said whatever, I put a check mark so I knew who I had spoken to. And that was not easy work because when you talk to people straight to the eye,
Oh yeah.
and they say, "What's that about?"
Yes.
And you try to explain, and they say, "What again?" And they ask you again. "Well, you want Black History? When are we going to have White History Month, Augustine?" A lot of provocative things that are said.
Yes.
And so you have the conversation where you bring it back to something where you can have a conversation with them and explain why it is
Yes.
you want to have this if they have to ask you those questions
That's right.
that they're asking you and that the general Canadian public need to know who we are. We had said in 1982 when we repatriated our Constitution and we amended it with the Charter of Rights and Freedom, we said, Section 15, we will not discriminate on the basis of
Mm.
age,
Mhm.
sex, religion, nationality, color, or place of origin. And when we were there, when I was there, I voted for sexual orientation.
Mhm.
And so we've seen changes over the years in terms of how we've moved, what policies we have put in place. And I think if I tell my own story is connected
Mhm.
with that, with Canada's progress and Canada's story
Mhm.
as we reached to that notion that we're a diverse, multicultural,
Yeah.
multiracial, multi-ethnic,
Yes.
multi-religious society, that we won't discriminate
Mhm.
for people on the basis of
Yeah.
whatnot. And later on, looking at all the gender issues that I addressed,
Mhm.
and the issue of inclusion, and the issue of ensuring that we respect each other in Canadian society and
Mhm.
make room for each other in
Yes.
Canadian society so that we can bring that word you use again, or authentic
Yes.
self,
Self.
to the marketplace and to the
Yes. Yes.
workplace, so that we could get along.
Exactly. And to that point, guys, there's no apology for speaking your truth and showing up. I realize that when we enter the world of advocacy or leadership, it doesn't matter how nice you are, people are going to hate. So your focus has to be on those who need you and those who see your value. And you have to be one of those people.